Classic Restos, proudly brought to you by Shannons, where you can be part of the Shannons Club. Penrite Oil, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, Pace Farm, and Duncan Foster Engineering. Hello and welcome to this special exclusive episode of Classic Restos. It is here in Detroit, and on this week's show, it's a special tribute to the man that put the world on wheels, Henry Ford. But before I go any further, see this. It's thanks to Shannons. Ask about multi-policy discounts and sign up for the Shannons Club. Call 134646 for a quote and see more at shannons.com.au. For oils, coolants, additives and technical assistance, Oil Right, use Penrite. And Hare and Forbes has the range. Buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. Well, when it comes to goosebump stuff, this here would have to go down as a main cause. Now, this here is the Piquette Plant. It's the first building in Detroit where Henry Ford first rolled off the famous Model Ts. And you want to know something? This building is still original. Hard to believe? Well then, come with me. Oh! Can you believe that these are the steps that Henry Ford walked up and down every day? It is hard to grasp, isn't it? Some plants produce products, but this plant manufactured a better world. In 1904, if you entered the Ford Motor Company's front door here, you would find the company's business offices, including sales and purchasing. Henry Ford's office was on the second floor, closer to where the action was, at least the action he preferred, but he was rarely in there. In 1904, the Piquette building produced models well before the Model T as we know it today. Ford Models B, C, F, K, N, R and S were manufactured beforehand. This was the Ford Motor Company's first purpose-built factory. The Model T was developed here, introduced in 1908 as the 1909 model. This building by today's standards is tiny, a late Victorian-style brick building modelled after the New England textile mills. It is just 402 feet long, 56 feet wide and just 3 stories tall. There are 355 windows that provide light in an era when industrial electric lighting was still a step above candles. The board approved $76,500 for construction in April 1904. Now, the first 12,000 Model T Fords ever made were assembled right here, then distributed via railroad across the United States of America and to various parts of the world. And it was through doors such as this one behind me where the vehicles rolled out Monday to Friday every week of the year. Just imagine the sweat dropped in here by, would you believe, 1,700 workers at one point. Hot, humid summers, icy cold winters. Imagine the conversations between workers, good situations and bad. It would have been an incredibly different world back then, and 3 floor levels here, being home to some of the world's proudest workers, could have had the walls talking for centuries to come. Obviously, the Piquette building simply became too small. The Ford Motor Company relocated to its new Highland Park plant in 1910, selling this building to Studebaker in 1911, where they proudly used it for automobile production until 1933. Sold in 2000 to the Model T Automotive Heritage complex, it was saved, as it was on the list for demolition. Thankfully, this grand old lady of stance, with 1 million stories to tell, is now operated as the Ford Piquette Avenue plant, an historic tourist attraction. I tell you what, when you talk about amazing history, things don't get much better than this. Now, we have Tom. Now, Tom's a bit of an awesome guy here. He's a tour guide here, very involved in the Piquette building here. How you doing, Tom?
Oh, very good, Fletch. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hey, thanks for coming in for this.
Happy to do it. Glad to be here.
I think that there's no better way to start than on the second floor, right outside Henry Ford's office. I mean, it's quite surreal, all this, to think that many years ago, over 100 years ago, the great man himself was sitting right there.
You couldn't be more correct. It is amazing. And people come here and they are really impressed with this experience. The room has been reconstructed to its original 1907 appearance. We like to say the only thing that is missing is Henry Ford himself.
So what can you tell us about Henry Ford's office and how did he conduct business? What did he do each day?
Well, each day he'd come in here. I'll tell you what, Henry didn't spend a lot of time in this office. He'd rather be out on the floor helping his men. If we look at his desk, we see that it's kind of a messy desk. Henry didn't attend to details as much as he should, and his son Edsel would come up here at age 12 and take the bills off of Daddy's desk and take them down to the finance department to be paid.
Henry had 2 or 3 goes at building cars before 1904, is that correct?
That is correct. So there was the Detroit Automobile Company of 1899, and then there's the Henry Ford Company of 1903.
And he didn't do so well.
He didn't do so well. As the story goes, Henry did build approximately 20 delivery trucks in the Detroit Automobile Company and didn't really complete any cars in the Henry Ford Company.
I tell you what, talk about sheer determination. I mean, boy, that man must have had some tenacity.
Yes, he did. Tremendous tenacity. And every time something went wrong, Henry would just get up off the ground and start over again. He was absolutely determined to have a car for the masses.
Okay, now, Tom, across the hall from Henry's office, what was that room there?
All right, that is Spider Huff's area where he works on the creation of a particular device called the flywheel magneto. And Spider is also responsible for hiring the first women into Ford Motor Company to do production work. What happened was the women working in a room adjacent to Spider Huff wound the coils of wire, and those wire coils are passed by magnets. The magnets, when they pass the coils, will create a current, which is amplified by the spark coil here, and when we get to a sufficient speed, we're able to fire the spark plug.
Tom, we just passed through the big green doors. We're still on level 2. What used to happen in this section?
In this section, what Henry did is they manufactured the cars not via an assembly line. It was by something called station assembly. And what he did, as a rule, almost always 3 different models were made. They made the heaviest cars on the first floor and the lighter cars on the top floors.
So the traditional production line, as we know it, happened after the Piquette building, didn't it?
That is correct, and that is a misconception. A lot of people believe that the assembly line was here, but indeed it was Highland Park, the next factory, 4 miles north of here. Just over your shoulder, we have various examples of the cars that were built here, beginning with Henry's Model A car and ending with the T. On the right-hand side, those are all the early Ford products. On the left-hand side, we have what we call Milwaukee Junction vehicles, which are vehicles competitive car manufacturers built in this district.
Tom, give us an idea, how many Model Ts, we'll pick on the T because it's just so famous, in its highlight before moving to the larger plant, how many Model Ts a day used to roll out of here?
It's very interesting that you asked that particular question because Henry starts here with a lower car count, but as time goes on, he's able to increase the production to a maximum of 101 cars in one day. So it's a record that he achieved, and it's well documented in many of the papers of the day. An astounding record for the time.
The place just doesn't look big enough. It's just incredible. I mean, the workers must have been like sardines bunched in here.
Well, let me talk about that because employment starts at 300 people here, and by the time he's working on the T's, he increases that to 1,700 workers. In order to contain them, he ends up putting additional workstations and additional buildings out in the parking lot, and those were used for assembly of the cars.
Tom, I have to make comment about the originality of the building. The timbers, the beams up in the ceiling, the floor that we're standing on. It's just amazing.
It is amazing. The style of this building is called the New England style building that was very predominant in America, where we have brick and timber. It is a maple wood floor, but what Henry did is he has a dual layer floor. Beneath our feet it's running east to west, but north above us it's north and south. Dual layer. This is also some of the fire prevention aspects that Henry put into the building. For instance, there are fire doors on either side of the walls. There's fire walls that separate the building into 4 unique sections, and this way you can never burn the whole plant down at the same time because The doors will isolate the fire. And they put cast iron capitals on top of the support beams to retard the advance of the flame. They also trim the corners of the columns that you can see, and that slows down the path of an active fire. So by orienting the building north and south, Henry takes full advantage of the sun. And the average manufacturing time of a car worked out to be about 10 to 12 hours, which was in that time period.
What an incredible man. What a thinker. So innovative. Now, Tom, what amazes me is the elevator here. Now, there used to be 2 elevators, right?
Yes, there was 2. In Henry's time, Henry had one in the front of the building and one in the back. This was a small little electric-controlled elevator, which was inadequate when Studebaker bought this building. So they put in their own gigantic little machine in the year 1926.
But prior to that, we had 1 elevator for the Model Ts to be getting dispatched out the doors downstairs.
The back elevator, 1 elevator, and all the 12,000 Model Ts made here went out that little elevator. Yes, sir.
Okay, Tom, up here on the 3rd floor. Wow, another level of action. What happened here?
In this particular room that we're standing in, Fletch, is the drafting department. And Henry made some nice modifications to this room. Number one, he made the windows in this room a lot larger, let in more light. Henry also, interestingly, put a little staircase that went down near his office so he could pop up here and check out the men at any time.
It's interesting too, working out plumbing too. You can see existing pipes that have been there since the early 1900s, where they've finished and new ones have started. There's lines on the floorboards where there were once walls, which obviously represented the office to the draftspeople. And it's a real jigsaw puzzle of time, isn't it?
It is, and sometimes we struggle to understand all of it. We do have some of the drawings of the buildings, and there are parts of the buildings that we have a very good idea of what happened in what year. But as you say, many years are a mystery to us, and many lines on the floor take some interesting study to try to figure it out.
I hope you're really enjoying this week's episode of Classic Restos, a tribute to the great man himself, Henry Ford. Back with more right after this.
Every weekend around Australia, motoring enthusiasts get together to share their passion for cars and bikes. It's a passion that brings us together. All sorts of people, all sorts of cars and bikes. From the classics of today to the classics of tomorrow. At Shannons, we understand enthusiasts. So when it comes to insurance, it's got to be Shannons. Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
In 1926, Australia's Penrite Oil Company was established. Almost 90 years of research, development and refining under the harsh Australian conditions has made Penrite Oil what it is today. Precision, performance, reliability and protection. Championship winning products. Trust Penrite.
Heron Forbes Machinery House has been family owned and operated for over 85 years, and it's easy to see why. And with a range like this, you cannot go wrong. Planning on welding? Look at these welding tables and clamps, air compressors and different air tools, sandblasting cabinets, through to spray guns. Everyone is welcome at Machinery House, and they're also open Saturday mornings. Their range of machine tools are workshop tested. There are competitive freight rates around Australia, and you can buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. So remember, Hare and Forbes has the range. Tom, we're on the 3rd level here now. A bit of an assembly area going on over there. Explain that for us.
Yes, so what we have set off to the side here is an example of station assembly, where Henry would have maybe 2 to 6 men working on either side of a frame of a car. There's a workbench that is underneath each one of the windows. Good daylight is streaming in there, and allows the men to work as a team. So they would, on average, build an automobile in 10 to 12 hours up here on the top floor.
Well, there's no doubt about it. The 3rd floor certainly had a lot to offer here at the plant.
Yes, Fletch. What I want to do is take you to the back of the plant where we have the secret room. Some really important things happen back there. I think it's something we should go take a look at.
There's only select staff who are allowed to go in there, correct?
Only about 8 of his most trusted men were allowed in this room.
All right, Tom, moving on through at the rear of level 3 now. Now, this secret room down the back, it's almost like Henry's boardroom, so to speak.
In many ways it is. What Henry did is he wanted to achieve the construction of the Model T and the design of the Model T in complete secrecy. So he announced in January of 1907 to 8 of his most trusted men to wall off an area on the 3rd floor that he would start a new job, and that new job would be the Model T.
We've got an engine, we've got a gearbox set up there. I mean, what's the story on that?
Well, there's a couple of exhibits there in the back we'll go take a look at in a minute, and we can see the first engine that Henry made, engine number 1 for the Model T, and of course the gearbox is very typical of the design of that time period.
Apparently, from what I believe too, Henry was a very visual type person.
Yes, he was visual. He only had really a 5th or 6th grade education. There was sort of a given talent that he had, the ability to recognize things on a 3-dimensional basis and work with these materials without an advanced education.
Our Fletch tour groups come through here, and Tom, well, we're lucky enough to get Tom to show our groups around. You're a walking encyclopedia, and I think the legacy to Mr. Ford, Henry Ford, what you stand for here, what you represent, to think that this building was on the list for demolition. It's now preserved, and it's people like yourself that keep this big dream alive. I just think that's totally awesome.
Fletch, thank you so kindly. Appreciate that. We're delighted that you came here. We're able to share this with the audience, and we hope that people come and see us.
Good on you, Tom. Thanks once again. Now, hang around, because coming up in today's show is the original home of Henry and Clara Ford. Well, you have seen the first Ford production plant, and now it's time to show you this, the final home for Henry and Clara Ford, Fairlane House. Here, a sense of eeriness surrounds you. It was here at his home in 1947 where Mr. Ford passed away, with wife Clara by his side. This incredible man had achieved so much. In February 1914, work began on what would be the couple's final home. Between 500 and 800 masons and woodcarvers worked year-round to complete the estate as quickly as possible. The Fords were basically being swamped by fame in busy Detroit. One attribution to Henry's fame, apart of course from his cars, was the introduced $5 per day for workers in January of 1914. A precedent set at the time, doubling wages overnight. This fantastic public relations move caused thousands of uninvited people from around the world to turn up at his last residence and at Ford, seeking desperate employment in the time. This generosity also made Mr. Ford a celebrity as well, and drove sales for the Ford car even higher. Seeking peace and in keeping with the Ford's love of nature, the residence was built with Ohio limestone to harmonise with the surrounding countryside. The grounds, designed by noted landscape architect Jens Jensen, were transformed from farmland into a natural, native landscape. Henry and Clara Ford built this 31,000 square foot Fairlane as their dream home on 1,300 acres, and it's just a couple of miles from where they were both born. At a time when Henry was skyrocketing to global fame after the success of Ford Motor Company and the Model T, Fairlane was indeed their sanctuary. It was their 15th and final home, where they enjoyed entertaining their grandchildren and many friends, including frequent visitor Thomas Edison. Fairlane was a house that is a unique blend of Midwestern Prairie school and English country manor styles. It was also the name given to one of the most popular Ford cars ever built, the Fairlane, sold between 1955 and 1970 in America and between 1959 and 2007 in Australia. The estate is located along the Rouge River and included a hydroelectric powerhouse and dam, a greenhouse, a working farm built to scale for their grandchildren, an indoor pool, skating house, staff cottages, bowling alley, and a pony barn, as well as a private garage and laboratory for Henry. Mr. Ford was proud of his simple tastes and felt no need to flaunt his substantial wealth. The residence's total cost was not to exceed $250,000, as instructed by Mr. Ford to his builders. Despite this directive, at the time of completion, the building cost $1.8 million. The interior decorating alone was an additional $175,000, and the property development and landscaping adding another $370,000 to the final bill. By January 1916, the Fords were completely settled into their new home. Well, here we are, inside Fairlane House. And it's actually quite surreal. This is real, pinch yourself stuff to realise that you're here.
Absolutely.
Now, we have Annie. Annie, tell us what's your role here at Fairlane?
Sure. I'm site coordinator here. So right now we're under a major restoration. It's a very exciting project. We have small events here for Ford Motor Company. We have fundraising events, and we bring in select groups of people to show people the amazing restoration. And so I handle the logistics of everyday life here.
Now, as soon as we walk through those glorious doors, here we are in the foyer, the staircase. I mean, words are escaping me here. It's just so elegant as soon as you walk in. Tell us what you can about this first section, Annie.
Sure. Well, this is a good section to introduce the house in general. 1914 was when the powerhouse was built. Thomas Edison and Henry Ford built it together. And then that powered the construction of the estate as well as what we have today. And so this house was built around 1915. And it was built by William Van Tyne, an architect that was previously unknown and since hasn't done anything.
I mean, talk about out in the woods here. I mean, they escaped for the serenity, didn't they?
Yes, absolutely. They needed a refuge. After Henry Ford created the $5 workday and the 40-hour week, their townhouse became quite the center of activity. The public was very interested, the press was very interested, and they needed a refuge. They also were avid bird watchers and naturalists, so this was the perfect place for them to spend their downtime.
Annie, I can't help but think the people, the dignitaries that have walked through here and have been here, it's beyond the comprehension.
Absolutely. We have people like Woodrow Wilson, George Washington Carver. Harvey Firestone was a very dear friend of Henry's, as was Thomas Edison. John Burroughs, the naturalist, frequented this property. He was also a bird watcher. And so there were industry giants and great minds at the time that walked through these halls.
Well, Detroit is a magnificent place, and so too is Carlisle, and you can see them both on a Fletch tour. Have a look at this.
There is nothing quite like a Fletch tour. Carlisle or Ford Nationals, GM Nationals and Chrysler Nationals await you.
Book a Fletch tour. It's amazing.
We've seen some absolutely amazing cars.
What an event.
Experience Route 66 from Chicago to Vegas or choose the Detroit tour.
I would make it a point to go to Fletch Tours and come to Detroit.
There are 5 Fletch tours. Select the one that suits you best. See fletchtours.com or contact All Things Travel, Lara.
If you have a restoration project, Hare and Forbes has the tools that you need. Look at these restoration products: shrinker stretchers, dollies, mallets, bead rollers, profile gauges, professional panel restoration kits, and so much more. Now I warn you, enter at your own risk because you will end up buying something. So come along to your Cap City store or browse and buy online at machineryhouse.com.au because Hare and Forbes has the range.
Penrite, Australian-made, family-owned and operated. Make premium quality engine and racing oils, warranty-approved coolants, automatic transmission and manual gear oils, a complete range of engine and fuel additives, heavy-duty and industrial products for every application. Visit penriteoil.com for more information. Penrite, Australian-made for Australian conditions since 1926.
I spend a lot of time out here. The RT Charger's the real deal. An E49. Remember A-Charger? I've always got projects on the go, so Shannon's laid-up cover helps protect my restorations. I'm Mopar through and through. It's a passion Shannon's understands. I wouldn't insure my cars and bikes with anyone else.
Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
Here we are in the master bedroom suite. Henry and Clara Ford. This is there's a bit of a sense of eeriness in this department.
There would be, because this is actually where Henry Ford died. On April 7th, 1947, he actually passed away in this very bedroom. He and Clara had gone to their winter home in Georgia, and there had been a historic flood here. They arrived just the day after the flood, and after taking a tour with all of his agents of his various properties and holdings to see the damage, he came back here where the powerhouse had actually gone down based on the flood. It was the first time that the powerhouse had shut down, so the entire house was lit by candlelight. And it was a pretty amazing day, considering most of his life had been based on mechanics, electricity, engineering. And so he actually died by candlelight, the same way he had come into the world. So it's a pretty incredible room when you think about it. Henry Ford died here.
Now, we see just outside of the bedroom here, there's a sunroom. Now, as you mentioned earlier, Henry was an avid bird watcher, and everything's set up there. I mean, the view out of the glass, panoramic from the room, well, just beautiful.
Absolutely, it's gorgeous. And that's where they would have spent a lot of their time. So up here, there's a sleeping porch, and downstairs is the sun porch where they would have spent a lot of their time with their grandkids, with their son Edsel. It's where they spent their recreation time. They had phonograph, they would listen to music, and bird watching.
I mean, the guy must have had to have relaxed somehow. So obviously the wilderness, the birds, that was his out.
I think so. We're all balanced, complicated people, and I think that is how he balanced himself out. And Clara was as well. She was interested in healthcare. She was interested in education. They both had varied interests that most people don't know about. And it's really only in their home that you can tell that story of who they were as people.
Now, currently under renovations, we're here in the sun porch. This is going to be stunning when it's finished. What can you tell us about this particular room?
Absolutely. So this room was really special to Henry and Clara. This is where they spent a lot of their recreation time. They would spend it watching the water, watching the birds. They were avid bird watchers, and they would have spent a lot of recreation time here. So this room is also special to us, to our organization, because this is our pilot room. We are restoring the entire house back to the way it would have looked originally when Henry and Clara designed it. So we're envisioning 1919 as our period of significance. We have great historic photos, great historic documentation, and lots of the original receipts and correspondence having to do with the construction and the furnishings of the house. And so in this room, we're testing out with different artisans how we will accomplish the restoration everywhere else in the house.
Low down in screen, we've got a bit of a high shot going on. Annie, what's the story here?
I wanted to give you a quick idea of what I'm talking about when I was just referring to the restoration. Over the years, every home, every building, it accumulates new chapters in its life. And to restore this house back to the way it was in 1919 when it was Henry and Clara's home, these are some of the things that we have to do. We have to do paint removal. We're basically exposing the former glory of this house, and it's really exciting.
This is beautiful. This is different to upstairs. We've almost got like a log cabin type feel. Lots of stonework, big thick timbers, and the smell of a burning fireplace. But again, element of eeriness. You reckon how many years since there's been a fire that's been burning in this place?
That's a great question, Fletch, and it's hard to know, but Clara herself, she died in 1950, so it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume it's been over 60 years.
You can still smell the fireplaces in here. Tell us about this room and what was its purpose.
Sure. So this is another recreation room just like the sun porch. This is the room that we call the field room, and it reflects Henry and Clara's love of Americana folk culture. They actually were very committed to preservation of their ideal of America, and that included Americana folk culture. So down here they would have contra dances, they would have fiddle circles. This was just another recreation room where they would have had a lot of socializing.
Well, Annie, this comes to the close of today's episode. Started off with the original Ford manufacturing plant there with Piquette, and it doesn't get much better than Henry Ford and Clara's home, Fairlane House. I just want to thank you so much. You're a walking encyclopedia, and your time here today to be on this special exclusive episode of Classic Restos, and I really want to thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's wonderful to have you here at the Henry Ford estate, and this is a great opportunity to mention that this is so much more than a home. It's so much more than, well, it's more than a house, it's a home, and it's so much more than Henry the car guy. It's Henry the man, the husband, the father. Jens Jensen designed the landscape. Clara was very very passionate about gardening, and this is actually the one of the upper floors. The garage is one of the upper floors of the hydroelectric power plant that Thomas Edison and Henry designed together. So much more than just the car guy, and it's really important to remember that when we're loving the car, we're loving the culture. He and Clara and Edsel were a family too.
So Henry's with us now. He'd be in the powerhouse, and Clara would be over there. She'd be in the garden, right?
You would find Clara in the garden with her roses, and you would find Henry upstairs doing R&D and tinkering, watch repair, working with the guys down in the powerhouse.
Well done. Well, I'm sure you'll agree. It's certainly been a lovely episode of Classic Restos, and again, Annie, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Fletch.
Well, what do we say about this one? I hope you've really enjoyed this week's exclusive episode of Classic Restos. You've seen the first Ford production plant here in Detroit, the Piquette building, and the grand home behind me, the Ford estate, Fairlane. In the meantime, no matter where you're watching Classic Restos from, please ride and drive safe. Until next week, I'm Fletch, signing off from Detroit, United States of America, and I thank you very much for watching.
You can like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ClassicRestosTV and watch catch-up episodes at shannons.com.au.
Classic Restos, proudly brought to you by Shannons, where you can be part of the Shannons Club. Penrite Oil, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, Pace Farm, and Duncan Foster Engineering.